Hello, thank you for joining us here at Unsolved Crimes with Cassie and Tony. Today, we're going to dive into the murder case of Melissa Witt that occurred more than 30 years ago. I'm going to give you a little rundown on the case before we actually dive into it. But on December 1st, 1994, Melissa was 19 years old. She planned to meet her mother at the bowling alley in Fort Smith, Arkansas. She disappeared in the bowling alley parking lot. 2 days later, Melissa's car was found by investigators in the bowling parking lot with a trail of blood leading away from the vehicle. On January 13, 1995, Melissa's new body was found by two hunters in the Ozark National Forest near Turner Bend in Franklin County. In the past 30 years plus since Melissa Wood's murder, a few suspects have popped up on investigators' radars, including the serial killer Charles Ray Vines, who was also later convicted for two murders, yet no one has been charged for the death of Melissa Wood. I know they stated that Charles Ray Vines, Cassie, was they labeled him as a serial killer, but he was, unless he had other murders that we don't know about, but he was convicted of those two murders that
Right.
usually three murders is what makes you a serial killer. But that's fine. We'll go with that. And Cassie, why don't you talk about the day of, right? What was Melissa's day like that day?
Yeah, so on the day that she actually disappeared, December 1st, 1994, it was a typical day for Melissa and her family. It was a Thursday. So she started her day in the morning preparing to go to school. Before she left, she had a small argument with her mom. She wanted to borrow some money, and they argued about that briefly before she headed out the door to get to class. After class, she had lunch with friends and went off to work. After work at around 5 p.m., she had some car issues. She needed her battery jumped. So she got help from some neighboring employees that were there. They jumped her car for her, and she drove off a little after that home, where she came across a note from her mom inviting her to Bowling World for some fun and a burger. This is something that they did often since they were in a church bowling league together.
Hmm. She did. I think her mom waited there right at the bowling alley till midnight. So she waited there till midnight. She got
Hmm.
concerned, but she figured, Melissa's just out with some friends. So she went home. But by like 3 in the morning, she got more concerned because it wasn't like Melissa to not reach out and let her know she wasn't going to come home. So she drove around just trying to look for her, just try and find her. Her friends stated they had not seen her. So that was very concerning for her mom, Mary Ann. So the next morning, she called the police department to report her missing, and the police kind of brushed it off because she did discuss with them that they had a little argument that morning off. So the police dismissed it as, hey, maybe she's just cooling off, and they
Mhm.
waited a couple days. So that kind of like delayed the investigation there as well.
And I can only imagine the thought process behind that. I mean, I can kind of understand why they would think that. That's something that, happens in everyday life. You're going to argue with your parents over small things. So I'm sure it was natural for them to come up with that instinct at first.
Yeah, it's crazy because that's like 2 days that you lose, right? I mean, I
Right.
watch all these shows and they say that 48 hours is the most important time frame for when a person is missing. It gives you a higher percentage of actually uh, finding that individual. But yeah,
Right.
I mean, 2 days later, the car was found and it was actually at the bowling alley parking. There was a trail of blood on it as well. They also found like one of her earrings by the vehicle. There was no surveillance video in the parking lot. I mean, it was the 90s, so you figured maybe they just didn't have it back then. They
Right.
did state that they had private security, but that was on weekends, and this happened on a weekday.
That's
So,
unfortunate.
yeah. I mean, they did end up, there were, I believe it was two trappers, hunters, that were out hunting and found her body on January 13th. They said the body was nude. Uh, they found it 50 miles away from where she was abducted, which was, of course, the parking lot in the bowling alley. So they found her 50 miles from there on January 13, 1995.
That's a
Uh,
pretty ways away from where she was abducted to have to go 50 miles. That's insane.
yeah, so I don't think, well, according to the reports, right, there was blood like near the car and there was a trail leading through the parking lot. But according to the reports, that blow did not cause the death, right?
Hmm.
I'm thinking they knocked her over the head to where she was bleeding, right?
Hmm.
But obviously she was still alive, and they drove her there to that the spot where they found her, which was uh in Franklin County. So
Yeah, and that would make sense because they did end up, like you had stated, they found her body 45 days after. And her death was ruled asphyxiation by strangulation. And they did see that she did inhale debris from the national forest. So she was murdered there. So that is absolutely correct. That blow was not, um, she did have blunt force trauma to her head, but that is not what killed her. Evidence shows that she was kidnapped, taken to that location, and murdered there.
investigators do believe she was sexually assaulted as well, but she was so decomposed that the medical examiner couldn't even determine if she was raped or not, which is sad, right? But she was murdered the day that she was abducted, which was the day of the that December. What was that? December 1st.
Yes.
Yeah, December 1st. So that's when she was abducted. But the investigators believe that that was also the same day where she was murdered. They did a more detailed investigation of the crime scene where she was found because it showed that the body was actually laying behind a big rock, but it was moved to the front of the rock because they saw drag trails. And then where they found her in front of the rock, which was like 30 feet away from the road. Um, they moved her there almost if they, wanted her to be found, right?
Yeah, almost as if they were proud of what they
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
I can't imagine why anyone would want that to be found apart from kind of like a prideful thing, like, hey, look what I did, look over here.
Yeah, that was crazy. They did collect some evidence there, at the crime scene. They had like cigarette butts and papers that were found near her body, along with a Mountain Dew can as well. There was a lot of stuff missing though, like her shoes were missing, her purse. She had a Mickey Mouse watch that she wore all the time that was missing, and her second gold hoop earring was never recovered. Um, I don't know. A lot of these killers sometimes they like to take trophies, right? So I'm thinking
Right.
maybe they took like the Mickey Mouse watch and stuff like that as
Hmm.
as a trophy. It's kind of insane, right? But let's talk about these witnesses because there was a few witnesses, right? The one that really had me like, wow, they should have looked into this more was the lady that called the police station and her call went to voicemail. And then you could hear her talking to her son, and she's heard asking him, "Are you going to tell them what you know?" And then the call ended, right? And they could never figure out who that was or whatnot. But I thought that was super important, right?
Yeah.
Like, man, like we have I would have pursued that more.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
don't think no one ever did. Just doing our investigation on this case, it doesn't seem like anyone even followed that. Like,
Hmm.
hey, let's dig more into who called because it was obvious that that kid could have some really good and important information that would probably solve this case.
Right. He obviously saw something and knew something. So that's a little disappointing that they didn't dig into that.
Hmm. Yeah, there was another one, right? There was one witness who stated that there was a female arguing with an African American in the parking lot at around 6:30 p.m. that night, right? And she didn't really think about anything because she said that happened all the time. There was arguments and fights in that parking lot all the time. But then there was an 11-year-old boy who actually came forward and said that he heard a female yelling for help in the parking lot between 6:30 and 7, which actually coincides with the same time the
Right.
previous witness said that they saw someone arguing there. So that could have been it right there. Um,
Yeah, so these are matching.
yeah, yeah. And then she also stated that it was more like an argument that she heard saying like "stop, leave me alone, go away." Those were the words used, and she said the female didn't seem to be scared. But then the woman that heard the argument also said his name starts with a B. Why would she even say that?
Yeah.
The
So
murderer's name starts with a B.
obviously she knew this person, it seems.
She knew him. Maybe she heard Melissa call his name. I mean, I don't know, right? But in any of the investigation that we've done, we've came up empty-handed with
Right.
as far as did they go and did they dig in any further,
Yeah, the
right?
information kind of just stops there with that.
Yeah, which is
Hmm.
to me is crazy. It really is because those are leads that you want to follow, right? I mean,
Right.
um, so there was another witness that came forward, a man on December 4th, who actually stated he saw a man changing clothes next to a black dark gray car right next to the location where the body was found.
Wow. So that could have been
Yeah.
whoever did it.
But I don't think none of this stuff was even looked into. Like these witnesses were giving these
Such good
yeah
information.
yeah these clues, right? If you want to call them, and just they didn't do anything with it. He even went on to say there was a decal on the side of the car. It was purple or blue. The person did not have any hunting equipment and seemed to be out of place. Had curly hair, roughly 180 pounds, and around 5'8", right? But I mean, they're in an area where they're hunting, right? And there's this person there, which, by the way, our research showed that people really don't go out there in their vehicles.
Right.
They use like their 4x4s and stuff like that. Their two 4-wheelers and stuff like
And
that.
then end
But
up on foot because if you're hunting, you
yeah,
don't want to scare away animals with your vehicle there.
but then this individual went in a regular car, right? Parked
Right.
there, had no hunting clothes or equipment, just standing there. I mean, that's kind of weird. That should have been followed as well. Let's talk about the suspects in the case. There were some good suspects here.
First, we have Larry Ray Swearinger. There was a rookie reporter by the name of Marcus Blair that discovered a front page newspaper from Houston, Texas. He saw that Larry Ray was arrested for murder of another college student around the same age, whose name, you're never going to believe this, was Melissa
Of
Trotter.
course.
Now,
Same first name.
same first name. Blair saw similarities between the murders of both Trotter and Witt, and he found that Melissa Witt and Trotter coincidentally looked about the same.
They looked alike. I mean, I
They looked
saw the
alike.
pictures. They really did. And then her body was also found in a national park, but it was in Houston. But
Yes.
she was also found in a national park. That's crazy to me, right?
Sometimes you look at things like that and you have to just think this can't be a coincidence. This is obviously an MO of whoever did this.
Yeah, yeah. Then there was Travis Crouch. Now this guy was a strong suspect, in my opinion, right?
Yes.
Because he was convicted 1987 of sexually assaulting a 20-year-old woman in Broomfield, Colorado. In this case, he kidnapped the woman in her own car and drove her to a remote location in the mountains where he violently sexually assaulted her. After he passed out in the vehicle, the victim was able to escape, and she did end up reporting the assault to the police. And he was arrested right there and there that same night. He was actually still in the vehicle when they arrested him, which
Which
was
is insane. I believe that he and a friend stopped at a store to pick up beer and condoms, and the friend left. He knew exactly what was going to happen and didn't want to be involved. So once he kidnapped her and everything, he just passed out from too much.
But see, that's another thing
Should
right
we not
there.
include it?
Where is that friend?
Yeah.
Why
So
can't we put our foot on his neck, right? And say, hey, what happened then? What happened that night? You were there with him. Obviously, you didn't go with him, but what was discussed? Either way, he was convicted anyway for that. But here's the kicker, too. So we know that he's a rapist, right? We know that he kidnaps women, right? He
right.
also had ties to the Baptist camp, which his parents managed, which were just 2.8 miles away from where Melissa's body was found. That's
And
crazy.
back in Arkansas, and he's committing these crimes in Colorado at this time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then his parents were like, oh, he wasn't in town at that time. But it so happened that there was a friend of the family who said, oh, no, he was here. His parents, they're not covering up for him. They just don't remember. But he was here. Something about he went out he was there because someone saw him pick up a puppy that he had purchased. And then there was a witness that also stated he was out in the property hunting with his dad. So obviously he was there. So I don't know what that was all
Right.
about. I know the friend stated he's not a murderer. He is a rapist, but not a murderer. I mean,
Likely
come on.
story.
Come
Also,
on.
likely story. Oh, we just don't remember when he was here, but he was here, but it couldn't have been around that time.
Yeah, that's just.
And hunting around the Baptist camp and where she was found
Hmm.
is a little too much of a coincidence.
Charles Ray Vines. Here's another good one too. Oh, by the way, guys, Travis Couch is serving 64 years for that rape. Right? He's still in prison. He's still maintaining his innocence, though. He's claiming he did not do that. So
That is insane with all the evidence that you would
I
still
know.
state
I
you're
know.
innocent.
And then, of course, there's Charles Ray Vines. Um, they arrested him. He was actually arrested for violently attacking a 16-year-old girl. He broke into her home, raping her, and almost killing her.
That's so sad.
That is. And man, even 7 years prior to that, in 1993, Charles brutally raped and beat an elderly woman named Juanita Wooford, right? And he was convicted for both of these assaults, but here's the kicker, right? They never got to do anything with him. He was
Right.
terminally ill, and that's why he passed away in 2019. It was just too late. Now, I could tell you this, though. They are looking, as of 2023, they're looking more into Travis Crouch right now, and they are trying to get his DNA. They're appalled that he's been in prison all this time. He was convicted in 1987, and there's still no DNA in the system for him, right? So right now, the Arkansas Police Department is actually looking into the investigators trying to get that DNA from him. I believe they got some, didn't they?
They did. Yes, they were able to obtain DNA from Melissa Witt's fingernail clippings.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, but those turned out to be female DNA.
Correct.
So yeah, so those were all female, which could have been. They said it could have been hers or it could have been someone else's, but most likely hers. But there was no male DNA under her fingernails, which it could be that the attack. If she defended herself, maybe the attacker was wearing long sleeves,
Right. I mean,
didn't
it
scratch him. I
was
mean,
still cold. You're thinking December, so
yeah,
despite it being always warm in Arkansas, it can get pretty cold over there. So I can see more so of that happening because I can't imagine that anyone wouldn't go out kicking and screaming.
I believe the ball was dropped big time on
I
this
agree.
case. To be honest with you, there was so much evidence here that they could have, you know, looked into a little bit more.
More witness statements they should have
Yeah,
definitely looked
yeah.
into. I really want to know why they did not trace the call in which that voicemail came in through.
Well, I don't. That's a good thing, but I don't think that they could trace it. I'm not sure. The reason why I'm saying that is because they didn't call 911. They called the police officer's
That's
number
right.
and left it on that police officer's voicemail, right? Now we have to also keep in mind it was 1995 ish, right? So
Yeah.
technology,
Back
not
then
sure
wasn't
what
as
was.
great.
I'm not sure if even caller ID was there yet. Maybe. No, I think it was.
I know
So
cell
I don't
phones
know.
were a
It
thing
had
around that time,
in 90. Yeah, they should have been
right?
able to hit some. Yeah, caller ID.
I
I
mean, either
remember it being.
way,
Yeah, they should have. They just didn't follow up, and that's
no,
that's the problem, guys. And you can. I mean, you can look it up. It just
there's no information
no.
on any of these witness statements that went into leads. I don't even think I know they came up with a sketch of who they believe it is, but I don't understand how they can't pinpoint that to a single person. And they did try to look at surveillance footage from the surrounding companies and businesses that were around the bowling world. Unfortunately, there just wasn't anything. And that's so frustrating. You know, you don't have surveillance and you don't have security only on weekends. That's insane to me.
It is, but there is a little bit of good news, right? And that good news is that they opened the case. They're
Yes.
still investigating the case. So as of early 2024, they do have some new detectives, actually investigators, that are looking into the case, which they have come up with additional information that they're not sharing at this time.
Yes.
In my opinion, I'm thinking it's with the whole Travis.
I
That's
agree.
that's where I'm leaning towards. But as we get this information as well, we will keep you guys updated. Her poor mom, Marianne, she passed away without knowing who did this to her daughter. But the
Hmm.
family deserves to know what happened to Melissa that night that she went missing. Will they ever find the person responsible? I don't know. I think they
Hmm.
have a good shot with the list of suspects that they have, and then the new information
Right.
that they received that they're not sharing at this time, by the way. But if they're not sharing it, it's got to be good. I'm thinking, right? I'm interested in speaking with anyone who's familiar or has any additional information about this case, and you can contact Cassie and myself at unsolvedcrimes.kt@gmail.com. If you have information which would assist solving the case, I encourage you to call the Fort Smith Police Department. We wanted to touch on something that, with this case, that kind of intertwined with another one that we're going to have our episode 2 podcast on, which is uh, another missing person in the same area. She was 6 years old when she went missing. We're not going to give any names or anything like that for now, but you'll see that on our second podcast. It is intertwined with the whole Melissa Witt case, so
Hmm.
that's going to be exciting to see because not only we will talk about the new case, but we'll also talk about new suspects, right, and
And
witnesses.
some of the same suspects that we've discussed today as well.
So I want to thank you guys for tuning in and spending some time here with Cassie and Tony on Unsolved Crimes. We really appreciate it. If you can go into our YouTube or from wherever you're listening, just go ahead and subscribe or like.
And make sure you are following all of our socials. We are on Facebook at Unsolved Crimes with Cassie and Tony. And you can listen to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts.